Dad bought a new house with borrowed money, lied about it, and didn't invite me to the housewarming party because he and my stepmom have hated me for years. So I did something that he would regret. Hi, so I ruined my dad's housewarming party a couple of days ago, but with good reason. So hear me out before making any judgments. I, 26M, lost my mother when I was 5 years old in a freak accident. My dad was single for a long time and didn't start dating again until I was 13. So he and I were very close for a long time. It stayed that way until he started dating my stepmom, Nora, when I turned 15. They dated for a couple of years before getting married, and I always got this weird feeling that Nora didn't really like me, but she always behaved normally around me, so I didn't think much of it. I couldn't exactly start making a fuss about the fact that she didn't give me preferential treatment. After my dad and Nora got married, we lived together until I moved out for college. But when I came back home after graduation to live with my parents until I got a job, things were very different. Nora was very different, and now she openly disliked me. I tried to talk to my dad about it, but he just told me she was having a hard time because of some family trouble. I couldn't shake off the feeling that this was because of me, so I tried to move out as soon as possible. After that, I minimized contact with Nora. Even when I would visit my dad, I tried not to talk to her. For the past couple of years, I've been in touch with my dad but haven't had much to talk about with Nora. Last week, my dad called me up and told me they were moving into a new house since they had ended their lease on the old one and bought a new place. I was quite surprised because my dad's business had not been doing well for quite a few years, so I didn't think he would be able to buy a house. But I was happy for him. I congratulated him and offered to help him move into his new place. He took me up on that offer, so I was there with him every step of the way. I expected some gratitude for that, but later on, I found out from a couple of relatives that they were throwing a housewarming party, and I was not even invited. When I confronted my dad about it, he told me the reason he wasn't sure whether he wanted me at the party or not was because of Nora. Unsurprisingly, she believes this was a fresh start for them as a family, and there was no need for my dad to bring his past mistakes. He told me these were Nora's words, not his, and he didn't agree with them, but he could understand where she was coming from and respected her sentiments. So this was the reason he hadn't invited me, nor had he invited his ex-in-laws, even though he had been on good terms with all of us. He said he didn't agree that I was his mistake, but if he was going to follow what Nora was saying, then it obviously meant he agreed with her statement, and I took things that way. My dad and I ended up getting into a really bad fight because of that, and I decided to cut them out of my life because this was really toxic. I couldn't believe he was taking Nora's side over his own son. When I spoke to my maternal grandparents, they were very upset because they had always treated my father like their own son after my mother passed away. This was not something they were expecting from him. They also believed Nora had changed him, and not in a good way. We don't even know what problem she has with us exactly, but she's pretty stupid because my mother isn't even around to compete with her anymore. So she's competing with her family instead. It just shows how pathetic she is to be competing for no reason, since we had always treated her nicely, but she always had an attitude around us. For a couple of days, I didn't speak to anybody about this, but then my aunt reached out to me to ask why I wasn't attending my dad's housewarming party. She believed having a business retreat on the same day was not a good enough excuse to miss this event. I had no idea what she was talking about, so I told her that wasn't the real reason I was missing this event. It was because I wasn't even invited. Both of us figured out that my dad had been lying to all the guests about why I wouldn't be attending, so they wouldn't ask questions later. He told everyone I had a business retreat on the same day and really wanted to go on that trip, which is why I was skipping his housewarming party. I found that very annoying and told my aunt the entire truth. I also told her what Nora said about me being my dad's past mistake and how he just went along with her. I was very hurt, so I didn't keep anything to myself and spilled all the details of the drama. She heard me out, was equally upset, and told me she was going to talk to my dad and fix the situation. But I told her not to bother because that would make it worse. She then told me she wouldn't speak to my dad, but there was something I could do to make sure my dad didn't get away with the lies he had been telling everyone. My aunt told me my father had been telling everyone he bought the house with his own money, but all of us knew his business hadn't been doing well, so we had our doubts. My aunt also had reservations, so she talked to my dad about it, and he had been stupid enough to tell her the truth. He borrowed a bunch of money from one of his business associates, let's call him Sam, who recently inherited a lot of money from a relative. I knew Sam. He had been working with my father for a long time. They were also close friends and had a lot of dinners together until Sam moved away. My dad apparently told Sam he needed to borrow money because I needed it for my expenses. My dad's business wasn't doing well, so he couldn't help me, but he didn't want to let his son down. That's how he convinced Sam to lend him the money, but he intended to use it to buy a new house because he had saved enough money and needed a bit more. He wanted to buy a new house because then he could save money on rent and pay back Sam whenever his business took off, unlike rent, which he would have to pay every month or face eviction. This was a brilliant idea, and he bragged about it to my aunt. She told him it was terribly dishonest, but he didn't seem to care. He had been telling everyone he finally made it on his own because he was a homeowner. My aunt knew the truth. And the best part was he didn't have to tell Sam or invite him to the party because he didn't live here. My aunt told me all this and said she wasn't putting ideas in my head, but if I wanted to get back at my father, I knew what to do. I thought about it for a couple of days, but then I decided to call Sam up because I felt quite insulted by how my father treated me. I was very upset and couldn't just let this go. So I called Sam, told him everything, and asked for his help. I wasn't sure if he would agree, but he agreed to my plan immediately and said he couldn't believe my dad would do such a thing. Apparently, he had been reluctant to help my dad initially because he was planning on using his entire inheritance for his kids and wanted to set it all aside for them so he could use his money for his retirement fund. He also knew my dad's business wasn't doing well, so he wasn't sure how long it would take for my dad to return the money. He had been skeptical about lending him money, but my dad had been insistent and sentimental about helping me. So Sam couldn't decline and ended up giving him the money. And now, to find out that it had all been a lie and an act to get money out of him just so he could buy a new house and then not even invite me to the housewarming party was disgusting. The cherry on top was that a couple of friends told him my dad had bought a new house. When he confronted my father about it, my dad lied and said it was from the money his wife had saved up, and he hadn't used a single dollar from what he borrowed because that was all for me. Sam was furious at being lied to, and I didn't need to convince him much to follow my plan. A few days ago, on the day of the party, I showed up at my father's house with Sam. He was a bit surprised to see us, but didn't want to create a scene in front of all the guests. He pulled us aside and told us to leave before we did anything. He said he would explain everything later, but for now, he just wanted us to leave because he didn't want things to go south. But that's not what Sam and I were here for. We told him we didn't care and that this was exactly what he deserved. We made the announcement as loudly as we could, letting everyone know my father hadn't saved up enough money to buy the house on his own. We told them what he said to Sam and how he borrowed money to help me, then didn't even invite me after I helped him move in, just because Nora didn't want me around. We exposed all.